Exactly. Good morning. Thank you all for coming out today, and the Banking and Consumer Affairs Committee, and for Wednesday, February the 9th. And Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Representatives Boyd, Bricken, Camper, Faison, Haston, Lynn, Powell, Vaughn, Chairman Powers.
Here.
Chairman, you have a quorum.
Great. Well, thank you all for being here. We got a couple of great presentations today, but got a little housekeeping to do too. But first, before we do that, do we have any personal orders or announcements from any of the members? And we just lost another member, but anyway, okay, well, let's go. Here we go. On item 1, House Bill 1996 has been taken off notice. Item number 2, House Bill, I had to hit the gavel when I do that. I don't have to do it when I roll it, do I? House Bill 1873 is rolled 1 week. Do it again. House Bill 1636 has been rolled 2 weeks. Our social media calendar, we're going to have one on March the 2nd. We're going to put all of our social media bills. There's several out there, so they're all going to be heard on March the 2nd. So if you have a social media related bill that's been assigned to this committee, please put those on notice by February the 23rd. February the 23rd. Okay, hit it again. And so we don't have any bills up today, but we have 2 great presentations. And so at this time, I'd like to go out of session and welcome Commissioner Gonzalez up to the podium and give us an update on our financial institutions. Commissioner, you are recognized. We're out of session.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's always a pleasure to be in this committee, and look forward to giving you a little bit of information with regard to an update on what we're doing in the financial institutions area. There's a lot going on, and just as a reminder, let me provide some basic background. As you know, our mission is to provide for a safe and sound banking system for the people of this state, but to do it in a way that gives institutions the ability to contribute to economic progress in the state. We call that regulatory balance, and we simply go about doing that by tailoring regulation to the merits of each institution. We want to avoid a one-size-fits-all approach. We do 4 basic core activities. First, by application, we determine who enters the banking system. Second, examinations to determine the condition of institutions, whether they're in compliance with state and federal laws. By enforcement actions, we deal with issues, and consumer education is an absolute key to a safe and sound banking system. With regard to the condition of banks and credit unions, the great majority of our institutions are healthy, continue serving the economic needs of the state. Our initial response to COVID-19 was to pause our exams for a brief time to give institutions the opportunity to focus on their communities, and they did that. We reestablished our exam program completely off-site, which reduced burden and cost to the industry because we reduced travel costs. Once we complete the downsize of our office space in the Tennessee Tower and add those savings to the travel savings we've established, we'll see roughly $1 million in savings on an annual basis. When health concerns are not a primary concern for institutions and regulators alike, we plan to engage in essentially a hybrid exam, maintaining an off-site presence during examinations, but being on-site when institutions request we do so or when conditions or issues dictate that we should. One of our major goals and challenges is to right-size our examination workforce. The total bank and trust assets under our supervision was just over $70 billion in 2014. And by the end of last year, the combined assets, bank and trust, was nearly $450 billion. The growth is projected to continue, especially on the trust side, where Tennessee trust law, along with our balanced regulatory approach, has trust professionals and other interested parties looking to possibly establish trust operations in Tennessee. And this state is now home to 3 of the largest banks in the country, It's not only the size of these institutions spread over multiple states, but the complexity of operations and activities that we're working hard to address. At the same time, we must also focus on our smaller community-based institutions that not only support rural Tennessee economies, but urban communities as well. If we consider all the thousands of institutions and entities under our jurisdiction, including non-deposit companies, then our jurisdiction has probably reached $500 billion in assets and thousands of industry employees impacting essentially every Tennessee community. And we supervise this $500 billion industry with 160 department positions and a $31 million budget. Budget efficiencies will also help us to make needed salary adjustments to support our regulation of a growing banking system and retain experienced employees. Our regulation approach is tailored to facilitate economic development, not hold it back. Let me provide just a few thoughts on the regulation of thousands of non-deposit companies. As you know, about 8 years ago, we implemented for the first time a risk-focused examination of non-deposit companies based on a variety of risk factors. We rate these companies low, moderate, or high risk. For those companies that are low risk, we can push out the frequency of exams to put more of a focus on companies that show a higher risk potential to consumers. High-risk companies are scheduled to receive at least one exam per year. Our last reporting period reflected that 8.35% of the non-deposit population was rated as high risk. When we first began this program, the percentage of high-risk companies was just over 10%. The percentage since then has generally fallen between 7 and 9%. The number of licensed companies under our jurisdiction has also fallen slightly over the last 5 years, from just under 4,700 to about 4,500. Some of this is due to the COVID environment. Money transmission and mortgage saw large increases in license counts over the 5-year period. Mortgage loan originators have doubled since 2016 to over 20,000. On the other hand, payday lenders and title pledge lenders lost well over 500 locations in Tennessee over the last 5 years. Another important goal and challenge for financial institutions and the department is cybersecurity. Banks and credit unions in general continue to do a good job regarding IT operations and security, and this has been reflected in the IT exams and cybersecurity assessments in 2021. The overwhelming majority of institutions are at baseline cyber maturity, which is the minimum required by regulation, with several institutions moving to higher maturity levels, which is promising as we continue to see increases in the cyber threat levels against the financial services industry. We're strengthening our department's regulatory capabilities by the addition of a few staff. And here's some of our goals that we have in the regulatory IT area. We want to continue to build on the TEMA relationship through the further development of cyber exercises with financial institutions. We want to set cyber forums, get feedback from banks and credit unions later this year as to the IT challenges that the industries face. We want to enhance our examiner training and explore tools that would allow us to monitor IT risk on the non-deposit side. Another important goal and challenge is to understand and work with other regulators and financial institutions that want to engage in digital asset activities. We've made an effort inside the department to continually learn about this area, and it's an ongoing process. Digital assets are non-tangible assets that are created, traded, and stored in digital format on the internet. Digital assets may take many forms and may use various underlying technologies, such as blockchain. In the context of blockchain, digital assets include cryptocurrency and tokens. Federal financial regulators have not yet developed a comprehensive regulatory scheme for digital assets. In 2021, after analyzing the risk of stablecoins, federal prudential regulators suggested limiting their issuance to insured depository institutions. In another report, those same regulators outlined a plan prioritizing the development of a common regulatory framework for digital assets in this year. Some federal regulators appear to take the position that innovation should happen, but only within the regulated banking system. Most states have adopted a wait-and-see approach to virtual currency regulation. The Conference of State Bank Supervisors, which is the professional organization of banking regulators, state bank regulators, developed a model law for money service businesses and has included a digital asset section that is intended to encourage consistency in state-level regulation. And we're looking closely at this model law. Congress has seen the introduction of dozens of bills focused in this area. Last session, our department proposed legislation to amend our wild card statute, and that legislation was enacted. The wild card provision in our Banking Act allows state banks to engage in the same activities as national banks. Until last year, that power was limited to the terms and conditions established by the federal regulator of national banks. That did not change. What did change, though, was the ability of state banks to make application to the department to obtain a more tailored power than what the federal regulator might give to national banks if the state bank can show that the modified powers sought are safe and sound and can support the needs of their customers. We believe this legislation that you passed last year can allow our state banks the ability to engage in certain activities in a way that makes sense for state banks. There's obviously a role for government in setting the safe perimeter and direction as to how financial institutions operate in the digital space, but I also like this approach for our department that allows us to partner with our federal regulators and financial institutions rather than trying to establish a one-size-fits-all approach. Once we see what Washington establishes as the regulatory perimeter to engage in crypto activity, then we can hopefully help banks through this state law tailor their approach. We also license non-bank money transmitters, and some of them exchange virtual currency for virtual currency or fiat currency like the dollar for virtual currency. Our jurisdiction is limited to the fiat aspect of these transactions. But as I said, we're reviewing potential changes to our money transmitter laws to give more clarity for money transmitters and our department going forward. The community banking sector within the state is beginning to think about customer demand for digital asset access, primarily through partnerships with established fintechs. Some of these third parties might be licensed by the department as money transmitters. Banks have also explored opportunities to leverage blockchain technology, and I've also heard some interest from credit unions as well. At a very basic level, I've had a few bankers mention to me that they've been approached by perhaps a few customers wanting the bank to help buy, sell, or hold cryptocurrency. It seems that most bankers are waiting and watching as to how Washington is going to react, but a few are actively exploring. And while there are some risks to certain digital asset activity, such as digital asset value volatility outside of stable coins, cybersecurity risk, some cryptocurrency exchanges might be vulnerable to being hacked or being targets of criminal activity. There's also numerous potential benefits as well, such as low cost, easy transactions, serving the unbanked, and being a potential hedge against inflation. And we're also going to be very interested in hearing what our law enforcement partners have to say about this area. So our department is constantly reviewing this fast-moving area, watching what the federal government is doing. We are also having a dialogue with our institutions to hear what they may be considering in this space. Our balanced regulatory approach applies to digital asset innovation as well. We want to work with our institutions as they seek to innovate in this space, but do it in a way to protect consumers and confidence in the banking system. And with that, I'm happy to try to answer your questions.
Sorry, thank you. We have a little housekeeping. Can you hold on just one moment that we have to do real quick? And so we're going to go back into session to do that. A little housekeeping now that we detect a quorum. Without objection, item number 1 was taken off notice. Item number 2 was rolled 1 week. Item number 3 was rolled 2 weeks. So now we'll go back out of session and we'll take any questions from anybody, and don't get up and leave and tell me. No, I'm kidding. No, we can take any questions from anyone on the panel here that you have for the commissioner. Did we have anybody on the list? Okay. Vice Chairman Bricken.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner, for being here. It's always a pleasure to see you, and I want to just testify in front of this committee. He does a wonderful job in regulating our banking industry, and I hope he'll stay in this position for a long, long time. So, but I do have a couple of questions. One of the current biggest issues in the banking field today is almost maintaining and hiring qualified staff, and the cost of staffing. And you said that there's 160 positions currently in your department?
Yes.
And with the need, especially in the IT field, but across the board, could you tell me kind of what kind of ranges, if I could ask, how in a government world can you get qualified men and women to come to work for you versus the private sector competition for that talent, because it is a specialty, especially in the IT side. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know what range of salary you're allowed in your department to go out and hire the qualified talent, but are you facing constraints in getting talent in a government salary range world?
We do have challenges. That's a great question, and it becomes an even greater question for us just because of the growth in the banking system. You know, I mentioned in 2014 the combined assets of banks and trust under our supervision, a little bit over $70 billion. At the end of last year, $450 billion. And with the cyber threat levels that seem to be increasing all the time, we are, and we have hired additional IT staff. It is challenging. Just looking for bank examiners, there was a point last year that we had hired 13 new bank examiners, but at the same time, during the same period, we lost 8. So it's 2 steps forward and 1 step backwards. I think because we are primarily working from home, I think that has helped to some degree to give flexibility in work-life balance. At the same time, I do think we need to continue looking at compensation because of the competition that we have for these kinds of positions. You know, in working with the administration, which has been great to support our efforts, we did make an effort to target some positions over the last year, but it's a constant effort to do that. So I would just simply say that it's probably more challenging now than ever, and in particular in the bank examination area, that's our most challenging place. We have, I think the median experience level for bank examiners is roughly 8 years. In the other areas, credit union and non-bank, it's like 16 years. So we have got to do a better job of not only hiring but retaining, because it takes 4 to 5 years to train a bank examiner so that they can fully meet their responsibilities. But if we're losing, of course, you know the banking industry is paying the cost the expense, the compensation of our staff. So if we lose someone after 3, 4, 5, 6 years, the industry is not getting a return on the assessment that we charge them. If we lose folks that early, we put a lot of money into training and salary and benefits, but if we can't hold on to them for a significant amount of time, then the industry is not going to get a return on that investment.
Just if I could get a clarification, I don't certainly understand how state human resources work, but are you limited in salary ranges by across-the-board state standards, or do you have latitude within your department to hire the talent you need at the salary levels that are out there?
You know, we are part of the state system. So I would just simply say that, you know, we're under the same rules as everyone else. We're not carved out in any way.
So you are limited then?
We are indeed.
Okay.
Vice Chairman Bricken, do you have another?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to shift gears. There was I guess I'm going to say an attempted acquisition of a commercial bank in Memphis by a credit union. I think your department has enjoined that, I'm going to call it action. But could you bring me up to date on where that stands? And do you see, I'm going to call it, any concern with that ever becoming large scale? Obviously, we know our friends in the credit union do not pay any state and federal income taxes, corporate excise taxes, and therefore a large-scale movement in that direction certainly would have large revenue effects to the state, and so it certainly should be a concern. So I'd like if you could talk about that a little bit.
We're in the midst of that litigation, so respectfully, I would request that I not get into a conversation about that.
Okay. Well, okay. Maybe I'll respect that. So.
I'm sorry, Vice Chairman Bricken.
I'll answer to anything, Mr. Chairman. I knew better than to get between my colleague and the banking commissioner here. He lights up whenever you come to visit with us, Mr. Commissioner, and I'll have to say that I have figured out that whenever you're in the room, the debate over who's the smartest fellow in the room usually ends, because we all know it's you. With regards to, we see a wide variety of bills in this committee with regards to a number of different topics, and one that has apparently drawn the attention of at least one of our colleagues is the suspicion that undocumented illegal aliens are using the non-deposit facilities throughout the state to send money back and forth internationally, and creates whether it's a security risk or a strain on the system or whatever. And I know that you and I have had a conversation with regards to this, but at the same time, your department has done some monitoring of wire activity. Could you speak to that with regards to, A, what role these non-deposit facilities play in serving the unbanked community, and about how large that segment of our population is, and the risks that we run with regards to either by ignoring these transactions or by somehow trying to tax or inhibit or regulate them through our statutes?
We regulate money transmitters. So these are non-deposit companies that take funds and move them from point A to point B. And that can be domestic or international. In the last few years, probably last 6, 7 years, the number of those companies have doubled. A number of those companies are engaged in exchange of virtual currency for virtual currency or virtual for fiat, meaning the dollar. And we've shared information with regard to the number of those transactions, which we're now reviewing. I don't have those numbers in front of me at this moment, but we can provide that to the committee. So it's a significant number, as you've seen. One of the things that we do from a regulatory standpoint is look at Bank Secrecy Act compliance of these entities, just as depository institutions are required to meet those expectations. I will say one of the things that's happened to me recently is I've been appointed as a state representative to the U.S. Treasury's Bank Secrecy Act Advisory Group. I've only attended part of one meeting so far, so I've not had a chance to get into it in a big way, but these are the kinds of issues that we'll be looking at. And this Treasury group is looking to regulators and the industry to provide information as to what can be done to support better compliance with Bank Secrecy Act rules and regulations. At the same time, what can be done from an efficiency standpoint to help banks and others be able to do it in the most efficient and cost-effective way possible. Because it doesn't do anyone any good if the regulation of that activity is so burdensome and so costly, it gets in the way of national security, which is one of the prime reasons for all this. So we do look at the non-deposit area for that kind of activity and to understand how do they go about compliance. So I hope that provides some overview as to what we do with respect to money transmitters.
As a follow-up,
Bond.
Mr. Chairman, with regards to our unbanked, the size of the unbanked community throughout the state, are you seeing that grow, shrink? What kind of trends are we seeing there? And then last thing I would ask about it, well, the other thing I'll ask you offline, but if you could address the unbanked community, that'd be great. Thank you.
The FDIC reviews this, I think it's every couple of years or so. And I think some of the trends, I'm just going by memory, so we'll have to check my memory on this. But I believe some of the trends have looked positive with respect to what's happening. I think, for instance, in the Nashville area, the percentage of unbanked is relatively low. I think one of the problems that we've seen, though, is in West Tennessee and in the Memphis area, I believe those numbers are in double digits, which is, that's something that's really caught our attention as to what we can do to lessen the number of the unbanked. That's an impact to economic conditions when you have a significant number of folks that are not banked. So, we've talked about this. We've talked about it with a number of other entities as to what can be done. We see some good trends, but when you see double digits there in West Tennessee, it's concerning.
Thank you. And the next person, Chairman Boyd, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner. It's always great to hear from you. A moment ago, on one of the slides, you mentioned that there has been a pretty good increase in the number of mortgage loan originators. Is that simply organic? I mean, are there that many people that are getting into the profession, or did something change? I know historically folks that worked at a bank were not required to become mortgage loan originators. Are they now required to do that, or is that just an organic increase?
The number of mortgage loan originators doubling since 2016, and I think really took off during the last couple of years. The lowering of rates. There's been a lot of discussion as to what the COVID environment has done from a mortgage standpoint. The sale of homes, the low inventory, just a lot of activity, I think, has produced a number of an increase in licensees, an increase in mortgage loan originators. Now we're going to be watching to see what's going to happen going forward. Is any of that activity going to maybe drop off a little bit as interest rates increase? You may see some of those numbers go down again. So it has been up and down for a number of years.
Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And a follow-up to that, I was brought a piece of legislation this year with regard to mortgage loan originators that they're requesting to be able to work remotely. And then there was some conversation where we thought they already could. And so I know that the folks that brought that to me have been in discussions with you. Could you speak to that for just a moment?
Sure. We've issued guidance some time ago that really staff, employees of all of our non-deposit companies should be able to work from home, and that continues to be our position. So we're in contact with, I think, the folks that you're referring to now to issue a bulletin for clarification going forward, but that remains our position.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. The next one on the committee, Chairman Haston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, for somebody that's checked their Coinbase account multiple times during this conversation already, when you started talking about cryptocurrency, I kind of grabbed my attention. I know it's an ongoing debate throughout a lot of states, but if Tennessee eventually had a regulatory framework in place for cryptocurrency, is that something that's going to attract that industry to the state or detract? And that might be something that is debatable right now, but just wanted to see what your opinion was.
I really don't know as to, what the impact would be. As I mentioned, there's most states have waited in particular, I think, to see what's happening on the federal level. There is a model state law that would give us some authority to regulate virtual currency in this non-deposit world. So we're looking at that very strongly. We are working with a handful of depository institutions that are seriously looking at some activity in this area. One in particular that's become very public, the association that they're working through, and that gives us really a front row view of what's happening in this area, and certainly working with federal regulators on that particular activity. So my view of what's happening, there's a lot of folks that are trying to figure out what should the regulatory infrastructure look like, and that hasn't been decided yet in Washington. With the change of leadership in some of these federal agencies, I just wonder how long it's going to take before they do that. Now, we're working with institutions right now as they seek to get involved in this area. So we're not waiting on that, but it's a very measured approach as folks sort of dip their toes into the crypto water. So there's there's more questions than there are answers at this point. I wish I could give you more.
Representative.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate your testimony, always being here, and I echo my colleagues' interest in blockchain and cryptocurrency technology. And I guess just a little bit of a commentary, then maybe a follow-up question. But My concern is, as somebody who represents Nashville, and we continue to want to try to attract in our state, strong technology companies, those that are interested in fintech, and I think that continues to create a robust economy. And as you see other states, I know Wyoming has sort of been a leader as far as embracing cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. Texas, Arizona. As a matter of fact, there was a legislator in Arizona that just proposed legislation to recognize Bitcoin as legal tender. I think that's maybe gone a little bit too far, but my concern is if we want to continue to make this state attractive to these companies that are investing in blockchain technology, that perhaps we wanted to take the lead and not wait on Washington, D.C., because if we're waiting on Washington, D.C., we're behind the 8 ball. And we've seen this with other issues in our state where we're kind of the last ones to embrace it. And other states are now way ahead of the curve, and those businesses are based in those other states generating revenue and creating robust economies, and we're kind of last to follow. So I would just, I hope that, your department and others will take a serious look at, what we can do to make this state attractive to these new technologies, specifically blockchain and cryptocurrencies, and have a positive regulatory environment. But I guess, again, feel free to respond if you'd like, but I just hate to say that we want to wait on Washington, D.C., and I realize that, there are some things we definitely need to wait on, but I also want to make sure that our state continues to remain attractive to these companies that are looking at these technologies and looking at different opportunities. For example, I know the mayor of Jackson, has been very outspoken about wanting to embrace Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and pay employees and, perhaps allow that city to invest in cryptocurrencies. So anyhow, just a commentary. If feel free to respond. No real question, but just wanted to make that comment.
Sure, and I appreciate those comments. The one thing, the main thing that I should say about this area is that our jurisdiction, of course, is just over financial institutions. So as far as what the business community as a whole seeks to do, that's outside of my jurisdiction. But with respect to banks and credit unions and money transmitters, then we're working with our federal partners there. So I don't want my comments to be taken that we're trying to hold back, the business community from engaging in blockchain or whatever, because that's not the case. Our responsibility is to make sure that as institutions seek to innovate, that they do that legally, and they do that from a prudent standpoint. So we're actively engaged with a handful of institutions that are doing some things in this area. We're not holding them back, but we're walking down that path with them as we're waiting for the perimeter to be established from a regulatory standpoint when it comes to digital assets. So there are things happening, and we're walking down that road with them, but everybody's learning together. Right. And we're just trying to make sure that we don't impact the confidence in the banking system, but we do allow innovation to go forward. That is, it's a delicate balance sometimes, but we're with you as far as wanting our institutions to be able to be involved in this, and we're just all trying to do it in the most prudent way possible.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate those comments. Clearly, any position you take or thoughts you have on it, you're clearly a leader in our state when it comes to anything financial and banking. I just hope that we can work together, collaborate with other partners in the state of Tennessee. I'd love us to really dig into this issue. I'm biased. I've got some legislation dealing specifically with that, but I think this state can specifically be a leader in this, and we can create a positive business climate for these companies that want to embrace this technology. But thank you for your comments.
Thank you. Representative Lynn.
Hi, Commissioner. How are you? Nice to see you. And in regard to crypto, I worry, there's such advantages for the United States of America to have the dollar as the world's reserve currency, and I fear that we're unwittingly shooting ourselves in the foot by pursuing the crypto and all of that. It's who knows what the future would be. But I'm just curious, your department, protects depositors and makes sure institutions run well. If someone did have a consumer complaint about crypto, I don't even know who they'd call. Has your department collected any phone calls? Anybody call just not realizing, well, you don't regulate crypto, but they don't know who else to call. I know in my office I haven't had any phone calls, but I'm just curious if anybody has called and if it was logged and we just can identify some of the concerns that might be emerging for consumers in crypto.
I don't recall. I'm just trying to think if we've received any queries on crypto. We put out a bulletin a number of years ago to the state with regard to crypto activity and risk and concerns that citizens should have in engaging in that area. And my guess is that the next presentation that you're going to hear from will probably talk a little bit about that, if that's Division of Consumer Affairs. I know Commerce and Insurance, as well as other states and the SEC, looking at some of these issues from a security standpoint. So there's tremendous discussion going on with respect to where the jurisdictional line should be established and what these products really are at the end of the day. Federal Reserve has just recently put out a report discussing a digital currency. So I just can't overstate how much activity is going on from a lot of different sources in looking at these issues and then trying to come up with an approach that makes sense.
All right, thank you. I have a couple of real quick, I hope they're real quick questions, and I just wanted to wait till everybody else got through. But on going back, and this Representative Powell alluded to this a while ago about the financial institutions that have been moving to Nashville, and my idea is always we wanted to become the Wall Street of the South. I know we have several that have already moved, and do you have any idea if there are any others looking at our state, and if so, what can we do to attract more of those people that are looking to leave New York or wherever? To what can we do to attract them to our state?
Mm-hmm. I don't know who else might be looking. Just from our standpoint, I can think of a handful of institutions that moved from out of state into Tennessee. And when I asked them, why did you consider and then do it, they liked the laws, they liked our regulatory approach. But one of the things that was mentioned more than once is they appreciate the governors that have been here in the General Assembly in creating economic conditions in the state that are stable, and to do that in a bipartisan way is very attractive. I just met with a trust company that was just formed, and this is from folks from out of state. I just met with them, and that's some of the things that they talked about. The stability of economic conditions here, and the laws that are created, the regulatory approach. You put all of that together, that seems to be why institutions are interested in Tennessee.
Great, thank you. Thank you. We're going to try to keep doing that too, as much as we can. The other thing you mentioned too, you were talking about like cyber attacks and different breaches and everything, and how much they've increased over. Do you have? I know you don't need just a number, but do you have just roughly an idea, like over the last year or so, how much that, has it gone up twofold or threefold or whatever? You know, I know that's a big problem everywhere.
It is a big I don't have particular numbers.
Right.
But I will say that, you know, we receive information from certain entities that give us the ability then to provide alerts to the industry. And we just had that occasion in the last week or two to do that. So this is a very challenging area. And that's one of the things that I was talking to Representative Bricken about, as far as being able to have the staff that can work with institutions and have the capability of assessing the IT position of institutions. We have got to continue to, we've made big strides over the last year or two, and probably the most important thing that we've done is I've created a position that reports to me that is responsible for cybersecurity, IT, from a regulatory standpoint for all of our divisions, not just bank, credit union, non-bank. So that individual is hiring some staff. We're enhancing our training, enhancing our ability to work with institutions. Everybody's got to up their game.
Right.
So we're hard at work at doing that.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, I've got some money coming from Africa too. I need to talk to you about. I got an email, so I'm sure that's a legitimate source. You were talking about the wire, or we were talking about the wires a while ago. I think Chairman Vaughn was talking about the wire transfers and everything. Is there a way? Because I know one thing that's concerning about that is tax revenue leaving our state. You know, that may just be sending it out. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure there's some coming into our state versus some that are going out of our state too. Do we ever get an estimate of how much actual tax revenue that would be lost, or that amount of that difference or whatever each year that for the wiring anything? Do we have anything like that?
I don't have any information on that.
And I think that's all I had. But we really appreciate everything you do, and thank you for coming here, and thank you for coming every year and giving us an update. And if we have no other questions, we're going to allow you to go back and keep working for the state of Tennessee. Thank you for all you do. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay, next we have, if I can find my list here, there it is. Next we have Claire Marcellos from the Division of Consumer Affairs to give the 2021 year-end report, and thank you for coming today. We have some handouts, but I think we're just going to email those to everyone, if that's okay. I think we're still under the no handout rule. I thought we had gotten over that, but I need to find out for sure. But until we do, we're just going to go ahead and email those out to everyone. So thank you for coming out today, and we appreciate your work and what you're doing for our constituents. So, Claire, you're recognized.
And good morning, Chairman and committee members. Again, my name is Claire Marcellos, and I serve as the Director of the Division of Consumer Affairs, also known as DCA. We are a part of the Attorney General's office, and our mission is to protect consumers and legitimate businesses from deceptive business practices, scams, and fraud in the marketplace. We do that in three main ways. We serve as Tennessee's clearinghouse for consumer complaints. We also offer a complaint mediation program to help resolve disputes between consumers and businesses. And then we also conduct statewide education and outreach to teach Tennesseans how to be savvy consumers and avoid scams. Before I go into talking a little bit more about The complaint mediation program, I did want to mention, as you may know, there was a change in state law that moved the Division of Consumer Affairs from the Department of Commerce and Insurance to the Attorney General's office. And that happened in fall of 2019. The intention of that move was to try to strengthen consumer protection by bringing together my team, which does complaint intake, and pairing them better with the Attorney General's office investigators and attorneys that enforce the consumer protection laws for the state. Not long after we did this, we were already seeing results. Once we had kind of settled in, we went ahead and began a project where we were partnering with AG investigators to help follow up with businesses that did not respond to consumer complaints. And within just a few months of doing that initiative, they had already recovered quite a bit of funds, almost $50,000 of funds, additional funds recovered for complainants through that project. And we continue to do that project, and we continue to see success from it. So that was phase one of the transition over to the Attorney General's office. Phase two involved, did I move it over? Let's see for you. Phase two involved trying to get our complaint system over from Commerce and Insurance. So we moved our staff over, but then we still had our complaint system, which was housed at Commerce and Insurance. We still were having to utilize their online complaint portal and some of their intake staff while we tried to prepare a plan to house those complaints within the Attorney General's office. So that took some time working with IT staff to prepare that system. But in July of 2021, we were able to move all that electronic complaint data over to the AG's law-based system. We then launched a complaint portal under the AG's website to where we could take in consumer complaints online. And then we were able to hire new staff to replace the duties that were being done through Commerce and Insurance. We had maintained an interagency agreement with them while they provided those services while we were getting settled. But as of July 2021, we are now completely under the AG's umbrella, and we are very thankful for our partners at Commerce and Insurance who helped us throughout that transition and supported us. So just wanted to provide that brief update, but I'll circle back to the complaint mediation program. As mentioned, we serve as the clearinghouse for consumer complaints. So we offer a complaint mediation program. If a consumer has a complaint against a business, such as they purchased a product and that product is not performing as it was advertised, they can file a complaint with our office and we will mediate that complaint. Our consumer specialist will send the complaint to the business, ask them to respond. When they do respond, we'll share that response with the complainant. They have an opportunity to provide a rebuttal or additional concerns. And we offer this as a way, what we hope is to open up the lines of communications between consumers and businesses so that the disputes may be able to be resolved without the need for formal action such as litigation. So consumers can utilize this service if they live in Tennessee, if the business that they are complaining about is located in Tennessee, or if the business transaction took place in Tennessee. They're able to file the complaint online through our portal. We can also provide a paper complaint form, or we can send a PDF form via email. If it's determined that the complaint is outside of our jurisdiction, we will try to get that complaint referred to the appropriate agency, especially if there's regulatory oversight. A lot of our common referrals go to Commerce and Insurance, either to their insurance division or to their regulatory board division. We also make quite a bit of referrals to the Department of Financial Institutions, as well as the Department of Health and many other agencies, including federal agencies such as the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I want to talk briefly about COVID issues. Of course, you know, when the pandemic first started in 2020, we were seeing a lot of complaints about price gouging, both things from health products, hand sanitizer, masks, things like that, as well as groceries and items such as that. The other big category we saw were refund disputes from consumers who either had purchased things, maybe it was travel, concert tickets, things like that, that were either they were not able to go to because of COVID or the events were canceled because of COVID-19. So we had quite a bit of influx of complaints all at one time for those matters, which kept our consumer specialists quite busy. By mid-September 2020, we had received over 500 consumer complaints regarding COVID-19, and we were able to recover about $62,000 at that point, and I don't have the numbers since that point. I'd have to go back and do that. But at that point, just within a few months, of the pandemic, we'd already recovered that much money because of those concerns. As the pandemic progressed into 2020, the issue shifted a little bit in that we just saw our general complaint categories rise significantly, with our monthly complaint totals nearly doubling in the first the second half of last year. The issues that we began to see were more things, landlord-tenant disputes definitely rose during that time, from issues such as evictions, rent increases, also just issues with not being able to get things repaired in rental properties, and we had a lot of mold complaints as well. As businesses responded, a lot of them cited issues with the supply chain and being able to get parts. If it was a repair business, they cited issues with being able to get the parts in to be able to provide this service for the consumers. A lot of them cited issues with employment and maintaining employees. This chart here illustrates our complaints received by month last year. As you can see, there's quite a bit of difference in the second half of the year, as I mentioned. In July is when we launched our complaint form. We worked to make sure that our complaint form was easy to use for consumers, easy for them to fill out. And we've seen a steady increase since that time of complaints coming in. You'll also note, anytime we see issues or times within the year where consumers are getting an influx of funds, so in March you see an uptick. Sometimes when consumers get their tax refund, they're going to be making bigger purchases. They're going to maybe be buying a car, maybe doing some remodeling around the home, and we generally will see complaints. We'll see an uptick, a little surge during those times. So we'll see that too when stimulus payments may have come in, anytime like that. Also, there was also a surge we see historically around the time, back to school time in August, when people are making purchases preparing for back to school as well. But definitely a significant increase for us, and even just looking now at our numbers in January and February, they remain high as well. In 2020, we received a total of 5,561 consumer complaints. That is significantly higher than the past years that you see listed there. Also listed are the top 10 complaint categories, and in the handout that Chairman mentioned, that's where you'll see a more detailed description of those categories. Home improvements, home repair, and home warranty are, home improvement issues that consumers have. What we see a lot of times is they hired someone to do a home improvement project, a remodeling project in the home, and paid them, and either the work was never done, it was not done properly, they damaged something in the home. We see that quite a bit, and that's a big category. And also the home service warranties, we see quite a bit of complaints that come in from people that have home service warranties that they think are going to cover an appliance replacement or something like that, and when that doesn't happen, they file a complaint on those issues. Landlord-tenant, I mentioned as well that we've seen a rise in those issues. Health services and products is where people have usually billing disputes with doctor's appointments or dentist appointments that they had, or dentist services. That's the main thing in that category, are those type of billing dispute complaints. But the others here, like I said, you can look through those handouts and see the description of those categories. I will note imposter scams, which is there as number 10, has entered this top 10 for the first time that I've seen. So that we've really seen a rise in the imposter scams, and so I think that that's certainly significant there. Enforcement and restitution. So as I mentioned, part of the move to the Attorney General's office was to have us pair, as the complaint intake side of things, to pair us better with the enforcement side, which is the Consumer Protection Division of the Attorney General's office. And that's where the attorneys that enforce the Tennessee Consumer Protection Act are housed. And so anytime we note a pattern of complaints in what we're seeing, or any type of potential violation of the Tennessee Consumer Protection Act, we will collaborate with the attorneys in the Consumer Protection Division so that they can look closer into that to see if any type of enforcement proceeding is needed. In 2021, enforcement proceedings by the AG's office resulted in over $20.5 million recovered. And just last but certainly not least are our consumer education highlights. And of course, like many agencies, we had to shift the way that we do outreach. We do quite a bit, historically, we do quite a bit of in-person outreach, especially to our older adult audience. So we like to go and actually do presentations. So we had to kind of pivot the way that we did that because of the pandemic. But we were able to partner more when we had to do more virtual presentations. We decided to try to partner more with the agencies that were already touching those communities. So we did presentations to APS. We also did several cities have financial consumer protection committees already established. So we reached out to those committees and did presentations as well. We did some recordings for some of the financial educators that are trained through the University of Tennessee. In addition, we tried to distribute materials in the wake of some of the natural disasters that happened, including the Waverly floods. And then we also worked with our partners at the Legal Aid Society to try to distribute resources, especially about COVID, the housing issues that we talked about with the rental issues that we've seen, the landlord-tenant issues that we've seen. We work with the Legal Aid Society to create some materials and distribute those to consumers to help with those issues. So that is just a brief summary of some of our activities and initiatives of the past year, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, well, thank you very much. You did a great job. And the first one is Representative Powell. You're recognized.
Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. I had a question about the jurisdiction. I know you touched on that, but you know, I continue to hear from constituents that a lot of the different scams and things are either now coming through texts. You know, people are getting texts, which I realize that kind of regulations on those and different laws. Obviously, emails now, these phone calls. Is that within your jurisdiction, or because so many of those, you know, there's no way to figure out exactly if they come from within Tennessee or not? And what can we do as a state to try to protect consumers against those scams?
Yeah, very good question. And so the issue is certainly in that many of these scams are originating from overseas. So it's very difficult for local and state authorities to pinpoint the perpetrator and do anything about that. So that's certainly frustrating, I know, from a consumer standpoint, but it's very difficult for us to figure out where they're going, you know, where they're coming from, and then they can pop up and it's just difficult to try to figure out where the perpetrator is in those. So as far as jurisdiction, we do try to encourage folks to file with the Federal Trade Commission to let them know about the scam as well, but it's really more of a preventative thing for our side, is trying to teach consumers what they can do to avoid being scammed. And that's tricky, especially now that there are different methods that the scammers are using to do that, but we've gotten to where we encourage folks to not answer the phone if they don't recognize the number that's calling, to be aware of any links that they're sent telling them to click this link to provide more information, especially links that are going to be asking for information of their personal or financial information. But it's certainly an ongoing issue, and jurisdiction-wise, it's difficult for local and state authorities to do something about those issues when a lot of them are happening from overseas.
Okay, and I have a couple of questions real quick. You mentioned about the department transferring from DCI to the AG's department. Can you just tell us a little bit about what the purpose of that was, or what benefit it is to your department to do that?
Sure. So over there, we would often meet with the Attorney General's office, but it makes it so much easier for us to actually be in the same department with them. We're able to channel information to them much more quickly about the complaints that are coming in. So the complaints that we get, we can let them know about trends that are happening on the consumer side of things, so that through the consumer complaints, so that they can see what needs to happen on the enforcement side of things. So it just created a closer working relationship between the two teams that are actually essentially both protecting consumers, but it just brought us together to strengthen that.
Thank you. And one other, when you're talking about when you get the complaints in and you're trying to handle them and to rectify the problem, what authority do you have? And I'm sure it's probably different in each category, but how are you able to respond, and what authority do you have to over, let's say, a homeowner's repair or whatever? What can you actually do to the company? I mean, is there to penalize them in some way for not just one, but continued problems that they're having?
Right. So the Division of Consumer Affairs, it's just we don't have any type of authority, or we can't issue any type of penalties. We can take in the complaints. Our complaint mediation process is voluntary. But as noted, if we see anything where we're seeing a business who's not responding to our complaints, we think that there's some type of potential violation of the law that's happening, we can then communicate that to the Attorney General's Office Consumer Protection Division, who can enforce the law and has a little bit more authority than the Division of Consumer Affairs. So that's really what we try to do, is look through, keep them posted on what we're seeing with the complaints that are coming in, so that we can then channel that information to them, and they can take a closer look to see if an enforcement action is needed.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, I know one problem we had a couple of years ago, we had a whole lot of, when the tornadoes and everything came through, and we had a whole lot of homeowner repairs, like roof, and we had roofing companies coming in from every state, and they were here and they would leave, and then we had no way of really, people didn't have any way of contacting them. They didn't, or they'd call a number and it wouldn't answer, and, they had a lot of problems. And I just wondered if there was any way to go back on those companies or find out who they are, especially if they're out-of-state companies that are just coming in here temporarily to do work.
Right. Anytime the natural disasters pop up, our investigators are usually on high alert for any type of complaints that come in. Of course, as I mentioned, we try to work with our partners, especially the Better Business Bureaus that are there locally. We have a specific brochure that we've partnered with them on that provides consumer tips for, in the wake of a disaster. So we try to partner with them to get that information out there. But our investigators are looking closely as DCA gets complaints in, to see if they can, get out to the community quickly. If there's some type of issue where we're seeing, okay, there seems to be some type of a pretend or fake contractor that's coming through, or a roofing company that's coming through, if we can get out there quickly before they, fly out of town or out of state, to try to see what can be done with that. So it is certainly an issue, especially, and it's a terrible issue to happen when folks have lost so much, but we definitely do see that.
Okay. All right, thank you. Representative Lynn.
Boy, it sounds like you guys are doing a great job. The increase in your website traffic is phenomenal, so that is incredible. I imagine the way you all work, I'm thinking about complaints coming in. There might be some complaints where, it's a dissatisfied customer, but really it's between them and the vendor or the establishment. And then others are perhaps licensed individuals, and you can funnel those to those licensing boards for further review and investigation. And then others you might get in and you can see it's a blatant violation of law per what the person has said, and then those you then funnel directly to someone in the Attorney General's office for investigation. Is that how sort of your your process map works?
Yeah, so if we see where someone else may regulate that industry, we may also continue to mediate it, but also refer it to that agency so that they can review it and process that through their own procedures. So we do a lot of referrals to the Tennessee Board for Licensing Contractors. When we talk about these home improvement complaints, a lot of them, we will also, especially if someone has a license, we're going to funnel that to them so that they can seek out any type of disciplinary action on that licensee.
Yeah. One of the, I think, best consumer education things any of us can do, all of us, your division, everybody, is for the consumer to get as much information as they can about the person they're doing business with or the business they're doing business with. I've had the storms come through my community, and that morning after that storm, you just feel so desperate, and someone comes along and says,
Sure.
Pay me, I'll do this. And they could be defrauding you. And I went into the community and myself, I'm walking the streets with the wreckage and the carnage, and really just kept telling people, person after person, you ask for their license if they are a contractor. You want to see a copy of their license. Take a picture of it so that you know you're dealing with a real business and not a scammer. And a lot of times people feel a little, oh, I don't want to ask for his license. No, you're protecting yourself, and then also ask for their certificate of insurance so that you're protecting yourself. That's one of the most important things that we can really spread around to people. And oftentimes the average consumer feels like, oh, I don't want to ask for a certificate of insurance. You get that certificate of insurance, because if he has an accident on your property, you're paying probably to repair his injury. So thank you for what you do. I just think you guys sound amazingly organized, and it's just terrific, and it's really worked out well to send you over to the AG's office, it sounds like. Thank you.
And that's a great point, too. The Commerce and Insurance also has a tool called verify.tn.gov, where consumers can use that to verify that someone has a license. So they can verify if someone's telling them, oh, I have a contractor's license, I can do this. There is a tool where consumers can go on to verify.tn.gov and actually check that. Of course, they could also call Commerce and Insurance, but that's definitely a consumer tip that we share when we're talking about the contractor space, is don't be afraid to go ahead and verify that contractor's license, because they will say that they're licensed, and then if the consumer doesn't check that, but there is they have the ability to do that through that tool. So.
And on that,
Yeah, I was going to follow up.
Sure.
I
Representative
will
Lynn.
put that out. I forgot about that, that there is that verify, because that's really important. I mean, I've had the tornadoes come through and then another storm come through and all of that, so it's been terrible. But the secondary thing is, just because they have a contractor's license, sometimes they don't have that certificate of insurance, and that is really critical that someone get a copy of that. If you've ever been stung by that, it's terrible. Thank you.
I agree, and I always tell everyone, and they don't do it, but being in the insurance business, I've seen too many things happen like that. But I always tell everybody to make sure they're bonded and insured, and to see a copy of that too, along with their license. Those three things are very important. They're going to be doing work on your home, and a lot of times people don't get it, and it turns out pretty bad for them. So I think, unless you have any other comments, I think we've covered a lot of things, and we really appreciate everything that you do and your help, because we do have some problems out there, and you're always willing to help us out, and we really appreciate that so much. And thank you for coming today and giving us an update on everything. And we look forward to you coming back. Okay, and we're going to go back in session. Do we have any other questions from anybody on what's left of the committee? Motion to adjourn. We're adjourned.